What if the man you loved most was the one who hurt you the deepest? The question slammed into Emmett Thompson like a freight train as he sat alone on the worn leather couch in his Chicago apartment. Rain streaked the tall windows overlooking the glittering skyline, and the city lights blurred through his unshed tears. At 28, Emmett had built a life that looked perfect on paper. He was a rising graphic designer at a respected downtown firm with a steady paycheck and a circle of friends who texted him memes at odd hours. His family back in rural Ohio sent birthday cards on time, even if their conversations always danced around the truth of who he was. But none of that mattered tonight. Because Jace Harlan, the man who had once made the world feel possible, had just walked out the door with a suitcase and a quiet, "I'm sorry," that echoed louder than any shout. 2 years earlier the night they met still played in Emmett's mind like a favorite song he couldn't stop replaying. It was a humid June evening at an industry mixer held in a converted warehouse near the river. Emmett had been hovering near the snack table, clutching a plastic cup of sparkling water and wondering why he had even come. Then Jace appeared, tall and confident, with dark wavy hair that fell just right and a smile that crinkled the corners of his hazel eyes. "You look like you'd rather be sketching on a park bench than networking," Jace said, his voice warm and teasing. They talked for 3 hours straight about design trends, bad coffee, and the quiet fear of never feeling quite enough. When Jace suggested they grab real coffee the next day, Emmett said yes before his brain could catch up. Their first real date happened at a little cafe with lake views. Sunlight danced on the water while Jace listened as Emmett spoke about growing up gay in a town where the word itself was whispered like a curse. "I spent high school pretending I was someone else," Emmett admitted, his voice low. Jace reached across the table and their fingers brushed. "I get it," he replied. "My family in Texas still thinks I'm the perfect straight son who'll settle down with a nice girl someday." The honesty cracked something open between them. Over the following months their relationship unfolded like a well-designed layout, clean lines, bold colors, and unexpected beauty. They cooked pasta together on weeknights, argued over which playlist was better, and fell asleep tangled in conversation rather than silence. When Jace suggested they move in together after 6 months, Emmett felt like the luckiest man alive. Life in their shared apartment felt like a sanctuary. They filled the space with framed posters of their favorite artists and a ridiculous number of houseplants. Friends like Marcus, their straight ally from the firm, would come over for board games and laugh at how perfectly synced Emmett and Jace seemed. "You two make the rest of us look bad," Marcus would say. Yet even in those golden months, small shadows lingered. Jace's phone would buzz with calls from Texas, and his shoulders would tighten. "Just Mom checking in," he would say, kissing Emmett's temple to change the subject. Emmett told himself it was nothing. Love was supposed to be patient. Love was supposed to trust. But patience has limits. The arguments started small. Jace working late, more often coming home with tension etched into his jaw. Emmett trying to bridge the gap with homemade dinners and gentle questions that went unanswered. Tonight had been the breaking point. Emmett had found the text on Jace's unlocked phone while Jace showered. A message from his mother. "We need to talk about this phase. Your cousin's wedding is next month, and she's expecting you to bring a date who fits." Jace had walked in to find Emmett staring at the screen. The confession spilled out fast and jagged. "I can't keep pretending with them, Emmett. They're threatening to cut me off completely. I love you, but I don't know if I'm strong enough for both worlds." The words landed like stones. Emmett had stood frozen while Jace packed. Now the apartment felt too big, too empty, and the question refused to leave his head. He stood up, crossed to the window, and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. Outside, cars moved like distant stars. Inside, his heart fractured into pieces he wasn't sure he could reassemble. What if the man you loved most was the one who hurt you the deepest? The question wasn't rhetorical anymore. It was his new reality. Emmett spent the next week moving through his days like a ghost. He went to the office, answered emails, and smiled at colleagues, but inside, he replayed every moment with Jace, searching for the warning signs he had missed. Marcus noticed first. Over lunch at their usual sandwich spot, he set down his coffee and looked Emmett straight in the eye. "You look like someone stole your dog. Talk to me." Emmett told him everything: the text, the confession, the suitcase. Marcus listened without interrupting, then leaned back. "That sucks, man. But you're not the first guy to love someone still fighting their own war. Question is, what are you going to do now?" Emmett had no answer. The flashbacks kept coming uninvited. He remembered the weekend they drove to Milwaukee just because. They had parked by the lake, shared a blanket, and watched the sunset paint the sky orange. Jace had rested his head on Emmett's shoulder and whispered, "This feels like home." At the time it had felt like forever. Now it felt like a lie. Another memory surfaced: their first fight. Jace had canceled plans with Emmett's sister, who was visiting from Ohio, because a last-minute work thing came up. Emmett had been hurt, but swallowed it. "Family comes first sometimes," Jace had said. Emmett wondered if that family had always been the real priority. By the end of the week, the silence in the apartment became unbearable. Emmett packed a bag and took the train to his sister Claire's place in the suburbs. Claire was the only family member who had never flinched when he came out. She opened the door, hugged him tight, and didn't ask questions until he was ready. Over tea at her kitchen table, he poured it all out. "I gave him everything, Claire. And he chose them." She listened, her eyes soft. "Loving someone doesn't mean you lose yourself. Maybe this is the universe forcing you to remember that." Her words landed gently, but they still stung. That night, Emmett lay on her guest bed, staring at the ceiling. The pain had layers. There was the loss of Jace the man, then the loss of the future they had planned, and beneath it all the old fear that maybe he wasn't worth fighting for. Back in the city, work offered no escape. A client meeting turned awkward when the account director made a casual joke about traditional family values that made Emmett's stomach twist. He realized how often he had dimmed his light to fit in. That evening, he wandered into a small bookstore near the office and picked up a memoir by a gay author about resilience. The first chapter opened with almost the same question that haunted him. He bought the book and read late into the night, underlining sentences that felt written for him. Jace texted once, "Can we talk?" Emmett stared at the message for 20 minutes before typing back, "Not yet." He wasn't ready to hear more excuses. Instead, he started running every morning along the lake path. Each mile burned away a little of the numbness. By the 7th day, he could breathe without the weight crushing his chest. The hurt was still there, raw and real, but something else was growing beside it. A quiet determination. He didn't know what came next, but he knew he couldn't keep loving someone who made him feel optional. The turning point arrived on a cold October afternoon. Emmett had joined a support group at the local LGBTQ center after Marcus slipped him the flyer. The room was simple: folding chairs and a circle of men who understood without needing explanations. The facilitator, a kind-eyed therapist named David, asked each person to share one thing they were learning. When it was Emmett's turn, the words tumbled out. "I'm learning that loving someone who can't choose you back isn't noble. It's just painful." The group nodded. No pity, just recognition. For the first time, Emmett felt seen without having to perform. That night, he called his parents in Ohio. The conversation was careful. His father cleared his throat a lot. His mother said, "We just want you happy, honey." But the subtext was clear. They still hoped he would settle down properly. Emmett hung up, feeling both relieved and exhausted. He realized family could hurt without meaning to. The next morning, he opened his laptop and started sketching again for the first time in weeks. The designs flowed different now, sharper, more honest. He pitched a new campaign at work built around authenticity. His boss loved it. The small win tasted like possibility. Jace tried again. This time he showed up at the apartment with coffee and flowers. Emmett let him in, but kept the door open like an exit strategy. Jace looked tired. "My family is unrelenting. They want me at the wedding with a woman on my arm." I panicked. I thought if I stepped back it would be easier for everyone. Emmett listened, feeling the old pull, but also something new steel in his spine. "Easier for them," he said quietly. "Not for me." Jace reached for his hand, but Emmett stepped back. "I loved you enough to fight for us. You loved me enough to leave. That's the difference." Jace left the flowers on the table and walked out. The click of the door sounded final. Emmett spent the following weeks rebuilding routines that belonged only to him. He joined a gym, took a pottery class, and started volunteering at the center. Each activity chipped away at the version of himself that had orbited Jace. Marcus dragged him to a baseball game, and they laughed until their sides hurt. Claire visited for a weekend, and they cooked together like old times. Slowly, the apartment stopped feeling like a crime scene. It started feeling like a home again, one that didn't require permission to exist. Yet the nights still brought doubts. Emmett would wake at 3 a.m., wondering if he had been too harsh. Had he missed Jace's own pain? The question twisted, but he had learned a new skill. He sat with the discomfort instead of texting Jace to fix it. He wrote in a journal pages and pages of unsent letters. The act of writing helped him see the pattern. He had always protected everyone else first. Now it was time to protect himself. Winter arrived with snow that blanketed the city in quiet white. Emmett's therapy sessions with David became the anchor he hadn't known he needed. In one session, David asked, "What does protecting yourself look like?" Emmett thought for a long time. "It looks like saying no when something asks me to shrink." The answer felt true. He started practicing it in small ways. When a colleague made an offhand comment about lifestyle choices, Emmett calmly replied, "My life isn't a choice, it's who I am." The room went silent, but Emmett stood taller afterward. At the center, he met others whose stories mirrored his own. One man named Theo shared how he had walked away from a 10-year relationship that kept him hidden. "I thought love meant sacrifice," Theo said. "Turns out love means boundaries." Emmett took the words home and taped them above his desk. He began to redesign his days around those boundaries. No more waiting for Jace's texts. No more scrolling old photos. Instead, he filled his calendar with things that fed his soul. A weekend trip to the Art Institute. Coffee with Marcus every Friday. Even a blind date that went nowhere but proved he could sit across from someone new without comparing. Jace's wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Elegant cream cardstock with gold lettering. Emmett stared at it for a full minute, then set it on the counter. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He simply wrote a short note declining and mailed it back. The act felt like closing a chapter with dignity. That evening, he treated himself to dinner at the cafe where they had their first date. He sat at the same table, ordered the same pasta, and toasted himself with sparkling water. "To choosing me," he whispered. The server smiled like he understood. Work took an exciting turn. The authenticity campaign he had pitched won a regional award. His boss pulled him aside and said, "You've changed." In a good way. Emmett smiled. The change was visible now. Less hesitation in meetings. More confidence in his ideas. He even started mentoring a new intern who reminded him of his younger self. "Don't dim your light for anyone," he told the kid one afternoon. Saying it out loud solidified it inside him. The holidays approached, and Emmett decided to spend Christmas with Claire instead of flying home. They decorated her tree with silly ornaments and watched old movies. On Christmas Eve, she handed him a small wrapped box. Inside was a keychain engraved with the words, "Protect your peace." Emmett laughed through tears. "You've been listening." She hugged him. "Always have." That night, as snow fell outside, Emmett felt something shift permanently. The pain of Jace was still a scar, but it no longer defined him. It had become the map that led him here, stronger, clearer, and finally safe in his own skin. Spring brought new colors to the city and new clarity to Emmett. He had started running longer distances, and one Sunday morning his route took him past the warehouse where he and Jace had first met. The building looked smaller now, just bricks and glass. He stopped and smiled at the memory without the sting. Growth felt like that, sometimes quiet and undeniable. Jace reached out one last time. A long email arrived in Emmett's inbox explaining the wedding had been miserable, how he missed their life together, and how he was finally starting therapy himself. "I hurt you because I was hurting," Jace wrote. "If you can forgive me, maybe we can try again as better men." Emmett read it twice, then closed the laptop. He walked to the lake, sat on a bench, and watched boats glide across the water. Forgiveness was possible. He felt it in his chest, soft and real. But going back wasn't. Some lessons only stick when you move forward. He replied that evening, "I forgive you, Jace. Truly. But I've learned how to stand on my own, and I'm not willing to unlearn it. I hope you find your peace too." He hit send and felt the last chain fall away. No drama. No tears. Just closure wrapped in kindness. Marcus celebrated with him over beers at their favorite bar. "Proud of you, man," he said, clinking glasses. "You protected your heart without closing it off." Emmett raised his glass. "To both of us learning that." At the center, he gave a short talk about his journey. The room was full, and when he finished, people clapped, not because the story was dramatic, but because it was honest. Afterward, Theo pulled him aside. "You helped me tonight." "Thank you." Emmett realized the circle had come around. The man who once needed support was now offering it. That felt like the real victory. Work offered him a promotion, and he accepted. The new role let him lead creative teams with the same authenticity he had fought to reclaim. On his first day in the bigger office, he hung a small framed quote above his desk. The man who hurt me most taught me how to protect myself. It wasn't about Jace anymore. It was about Emmett. He looked out the window at the spring sky and breathed easy. The question that had once kept him awake now had an answer he could live with. Summer unfolded warm and bright, and Emmett stood on the rooftop of his building watching fireworks bloom over the lake. 1 year had passed since the night Jace left. The apartment was the same, yet everything inside it felt different. New art on the walls, new books on the shelves, and a new version of himself in the mirror. He had dated casually, learned what he would and wouldn't accept, and discovered that real love started with the relationship he built with his own reflection. Claire visited again, this time with their nephew, who asked innocent questions about why Uncle Emmett didn't have a boyfriend. Emmett knelt down and answered simply, "Because I'm still learning to be my own best friend first." The boy nodded like that made perfect sense. Later, Claire hugged him goodbye. "You're shining, Em. Keep shining." He promised he would. At the center, he continued volunteering, now helping facilitate the group. One new member reminded him so much of his old self that he stayed late to talk. "It hurts now," Emmett told him, "but the hurt is teaching you something worth knowing." The young man left with lighter shoulders. Emmett locked up the room, feeling the full circle complete. Marcus threw a small party for Emmett's birthday. Friends old and new filled the apartment with laughter and stories. Someone asked about Jace. Emmett smiled easily. "He's doing his work. I'm doing mine. We're both better for it. No bitterness. Just truth." Later, when the last guest left, Emmett stood on the balcony with a cup of tea. The city hummed below him, alive and indifferent. He thought about the question that had started it all. What if the man you loved most was the one who hurt you the deepest? The answer had changed him. It had taught him that pain could be a teacher, love could be a mirror, and protection wasn't walls, it was wisdom. He raised his cup to the skyline. "Thank you, Jace," he whispered. "And thank you, me." Then he went inside, closed the door, and slept peacefully for the first time in years. In Emmett's story, we witness how loving the person who wounds you most can become the catalyst for the strongest version of yourself. The lesson is simple yet profound. Self-protection isn't about shutting out the world, but about knowing your worth so deeply that no one can make you doubt it again. My advice is this: choose kindness toward others, but never at the expense of your peace. Forgive when you can, walk away when you must, and always build a life that feels like home to you first. That's how you turn heartbreak into unbreakable strength.